Chapter 9. Medical Attention, Drugs, Transportation. On Saturday, April 7th, 1979, the Chicago Sun-Times carried the headline, "Gacy, stricken, rushed to hospital." That was the entire front page of the paper. Inside, on page 3, was a quarter-page picture of me, the same one they always used, taken right after my arrest when I had been sleepless for 2 days, drugged, hungry, whipped. The story caption read, "Gacy suffers serious heart attack." Sensationalism at its worst. First, they frenzied the public into hating me, then elated them with the good tidings of a heart attack. I hadn't suffered a heart attack, but that's what Cermak Hospital released to cover their own stupidity. I was rushed to Cook County Hospital, unconscious, my respiration dangerously shallow. They acted swiftly, pumping my stomach to evacuate the drugs given me mistakenly by a nurse, overdosing me. The panic that followed was unbelievable, and the contingent comedy of errors could have caused serious injury to others as well as to myself. The story was told me a few days later in the intensive care unit by one of the officers assigned to me. According to him, after the drug reaction, even before I had been loaded into the ambulance, a Cermak, for the trip to Cook County emergency room, the news media was at the jail's gate trying to scoop the first photos. Besides 8 officers crammed into the ambulance with me, 2 sheriff's cars with 6 men and each provided an escort. The media were like crazed animals, pursuing us like dogs after a kitten. On our arrival at Cook County Hospital, full film crews were already in place. It was close to midnight when 6 of the officers burst into the emergency room where people were waiting for medical attention. Picture, if you will, you're waiting emergency treatment when suddenly 6 uniformed men charge in, waving shotguns, pointing them at everyone, yelling at you to get against the wall. Behind them comes a guy on a gurney, accompanied by 8 more officers, some with guns drawn, followed by 6 more, screaming epithets at the news media, scuffling behind who were also ranting. The pyrotechnics of their flash cameras turning the room into a strobe-lit bedlam. A pregnant woman, trying to get out of the way, falls over a table into a wall. Others were so frightened they froze. One man failed to stop dead in his tracks. His open jacket revealed a holstered gun. The guard slammed him against the wall with the shotgun at the throat. Luckily, a doctor happened by and yelled, "Stop! That's the head of hospital security." The police were irrational over the possibility of me dying or escaping. What had to be done was to revitalize my system and get me stabilized. I was moved into the intensive care unit after they vacated the other patients. 9 officers were assigned to stand guard over me, with orders not to leave another room and before another full team arrived. 5 were in the room with me, and 4 more outside the door. All hospital personnel had to be searched before coming onto the floor. Visitors for other patients were also searched. Later, since ICU was on the ground floor, I could see the street outside. An officer was positioned at each end of the block, and 2 sat in a car outside the window. By morning, they had received the expected bomb threats. One maniac threatened to blow up the whole unit unless I was taken out of there. The atmosphere tingled with tension and restraint. The doctors assigned to me said that I didn't have a heart attack, but nonetheless could have died. I had been strongly hooked on Valium prior to my arrest and had been off the stuff for nearly 4 months. After I had avoided the hospital food for 2 weeks, the nurse at Cermak administered 20 milligrams of Valium, which guaranteed an overdose and nearly stopped my heart. I had become hypoglycemic along with my angina condition. The doctor was surprised that I hadn't gone into a coma. Both my sugar and potassium counts were dangerously low, so both were given me intravenously in straight, pure doses for 3 days. I didn't feel like eating after having my stomach pumped and was weak. The needles inserted into both arms and the wires attached to my chest to monitor my heart made me melancholic and desolate. Life seemed worthless. I felt trapped. The meaning of life was vague to me. On Sunday, the doctor ordered chest x-rays. The x-ray room was underground, so they closed off the entire half-block area, bringing in 25 additional officers. After searching the area and clearing out everyone except necessary staff, the police radioed to move me in. It was like a secret mission in Vietnam. 4 officers with shotguns preceded me, along with the hospital director and the security chief. 6 officers walked alongside the gurney like pallbearers, each on 3 on each side. 4 more followed. Everyone in the hospital knew who I was by then. The over-assignment of officers made it obvious. One officer could have put on a white coat and handled the transportation by himself, and no one would have been the wiser. When I left the hospital after a 6-day stay, it was the same thing. There was talk of using an armored car, then a helicopter, but they finally decided to use a paddy wagon with a 2-car escort. The transfer could have been made in 15 minutes, driving the speed limit, but that was too easy. The 3 vehicles tore down the streets with red lights flashing and sirens wailing as if it were a matter of life and death urgency. The scene was repeated any time I had to be taken somewhere. In late June, I went downtown for a brainwave test. They used 6 officers from the sheriff's department, 2 in a lead car and 4 in the sheriff's van with me. When we pulled into the valley behind the building, the place was covered with plainclothes officers. As we walked down the long halls on the 14th floor, there was an officer stationed at each door we passed, with 6 encircling me. When we were ready to leave, I was told that a crowd had gathered on the street by the alley, but I needn't worry. The Chicago police had 50 men there. Back to the freight elevator with my 6, picking up another as we passed each door, until there were 16 of us. More waited at the bottom when we got off. They peeked out the door, saw the crowd, and decided to back the van right up to the exit. We left with lights and sirens, barreling through downtown traffic. It seemed as if they wanted to draw attention to themselves, or else they had odd methods of protecting me. There were other times like that. When I went to Chicago University 3 times a week to see Dr. Lawrence Z. Friedman, 2 cars were always used for transportation. Each trip was made at breakneck speed, at times reaching 85 miles per hour on the Dan Orion Expressway. One morning, the media got wind that we were at the university, and to avoid pandemonium, the police cut short my 2-hour visit, escaped with me out the back door, and used the 2nd car as a following block to keep the newsmen back. I was always frantic. I had sunk to despair and didn't much care about life anymore. I had become something between a sideshow freak and a robot. The last time I was rushed to the hospital, I was dead drunk and suffering violent chest pains. During that day, I was to have an alcohol brainwave test given by Dr. James Kavanaugh. I was given 6 ounces of 100 proof scotch in a 30-minute period while wired to a machine to monitor my brainwaves. The idea was to study my brainwave patterns after the alcohol had taken effect. But the test was mismanaged. They wanted me out of there in a hurry, so they ran the tests while I was still taking the drinks. They overlooked the fact that it takes 30 minutes for alcohol to get into the bloodstream. When I got back to my room at Cermak, the liquor hit me full force. I thought that I was in a hotel and I wanted to go out and have another drink with the doctor. I got as far as the elevator before 2 officers tried to bring me back to the room. One I pushed onto the floor and the other went over a desk. Then 4 more tackled me to the floor and, with the help of the first 2, dragged me back into the room and tied me to the bed. The fall to the floor with 4 men holding me down caused the chest pains, and I thought I was going to die right there. Again to Cook County Hospital in a blaze of sirens and red lights, playing tag at the intersections, rushing into the emergency room with guns drawn. The doctor inserted an IV tube into my arm, took my blood pressure, and demanded expeditious results from a blood sample. Then he leaned over me close and smelled the booze. I was as high as the town drunk. On a Saturday night, the news that I was getting drunk in jail would not sit well with the public. The mass killer lounging away the days, sipping booze like an Epicurean. So a bogus story was concocted about an attack of angina. The big city administrative incompetence was becoming old hat. The last time I was moved in this fashion was for the jury selection in Rockford in January 1980. The media knew in advance that I was going, so they loitered around the jail gate, hoping to get photos and a byline. But the sheriff sent out a false honeypot to attract the flies. Our entourage sneaked out a back gate, just 2 station wagons with 4 men in each. Rather, a skeleton crew, compared to all the men and vehicles used for the short city jaunts. The deputies were armed to the gills with machine guns and shotguns, always ready for the overkill. The state troopers picked us up and rode ahead of us to clear the route. When we hit Winnebago County, a sheriff's escort led us right into town. At the courthouse, we drove into an underground garage, but even with all the preventative measures, the omnipresent press found cracks to pass through. Photographers, camera flashing, ran alongside the car as we drove down the ramp, until the overhead door descended in their path. But they had to print their story the next morning without a picture. The police kept anyone at all from getting that close to me. There were too many people who wanted me dead. 6 days later, when I left Rockford, there was only 1 car from the Winnebago Sheriff's Department, with 2 officers and 2 city police cars to escort us to the edge of the city and the tollway. The ride was quiet and uneventful. Rockford's police department and the Winnebago sheriff proved to be more professional than the Katzenjammers of Chicago and Cook County.